Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Governor Forum tonight. Pleasure to have you all here with us today. We're going to get started in a moment, but first, before we begin, I'd like you all to join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much. Please be seated. All right. Once again, welcome to the Vermont Governor's Forum, organized by the Bennington County, the Democratic and Republican committees of Bennington County. In particular, I want to thank Carol DuPont of the Bennington County Republicans and Michael Keene of the Bennington County Democrats for organizing this forum and for also helping develop the questions. In a moment or two, I'm going to go over the ground rules and the format, but before, I just have a few housekeeping notes I want to pass on. Please turn off your cell phones if you haven't done so already. And if you can, refrain from trying to connect to BBA's Wi-Fi. This event is being live streamed by GNAT TV, and if you log on to their internal Wi-Fi, that's going to impact the bandwidth. So if you wouldn't mind refraining from that, that would be most appreciated. The ground rules of our debate are going to be, our discussion are going to be roughly as follows. Each candidate is going to be asked a different question. We're going to go by alphabetical order. So Matt Dunn, by virtue of that, will get the first question. He will have 2 minutes to answer the question, and then the other three candidates will get 30 seconds to comment, respond, reply, whatever. Then we'll move on to Peter Galbraith. Same sequence. Mr. Galbraith will get 2 minutes to answer a question. Then we'll go to Mr. Lisman, then Sue Minter, back to Matt Dunn for 30-second comments, and then the third question will go to Bruce Lisman, 2 minutes, and so forth. I also wanted to say at the outset, we got word earlier this afternoon that Lieutenant Governor Phil Scott, who we had hoped to have attend tonight's forum, has been waylaid in Montpelier with the legislature being called back into the special one-day session to discuss the citing bill. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. Mr. Scott, when last we heard, was going to try and make it if he possibly could. However, pretty unlikely that he's going to be able to make it because the Senate went back into session at 5 o'clock this afternoon. So I would imagine that even though Mr. Scott is a fast driver, probably wouldn't be a good idea I don't think we can expect him to arrive. Anyway, given the fact that we are kind of on a tight time schedule here and going to try and leave about 25 or 26 minutes or so after we get through roughly 16 questions altogether for audience questions. So therefore, you folks have an important role to play as well in all of this. So hopefully you'll have some questions to ask when we get to that point. The most important person in the room potentially tonight is our timekeeper. We're going to have a challenge to keep these folks within the 2-minute or 30-second rule. So that's Riley Vogel down there in the front row. And don't mess with Mr. Vogel, is my advice. So if you keep talking after he gets past the binging his little bell there, I'll get rude and ruthless and we'll have to move on. Okay.
Do you give it just one point of clarification on the
Yes.
timing? Are you going to give a 30-second warning for those of us who are doing 2 minutes? Can you?
We could do that.
Can you do a wave or something at 30 seconds so we're not all like?
Because we don't, yeah.
We have different lengths. So anyway, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. After I should say after we get done with the audience questions, each candidate will have a minute to make a closing statement, and we'll be shooting to try and wrap up the evening by sometime between 8:30 and 8:45. Just real briefly, I know that most of you are already quite familiar with the candidates and who they are and everything, but I just wanted to introduce each one of them real briefly here so that we all know who's who. Again, starting with Matt Dunn. He is running for the Democratic nomination for the governorship. He grew up in Hartland, Vermont, and at the age of 22 was elected to the Vermont House of Representatives from Hartland and West Windsor. In 1998, he was named the House Majority Whip, at that time I think becoming one of the youngest, if I'm not mistaken, whips in the country. After 7 years in the state legislature, he was asked by the Clinton administration to serve as the director of the AmeriCorps Vista, where he served for 2 years. Returning to Vermont after that in 2002, he ran for the state senate from Windsor County, served for 2 terms, ran for lieutenant governor in 2006 and also for the governorship in 2010. Since 2006, he has worked for Google, the search engine firm, as their director of community affairs, a post that he stepped down from earlier this year to concentrate on his gubernatorial bid. Peter Galbraith is from nearby Townsend, just over the other side of the mountain there, as we might say. Has a long career in government going back to the 1970s. In 1993 through 1998, he was the U.S. ambassador to Croatia, where he helped end that war in what was Yugoslavia when that country fell into a state of collapse and civil war. He was also the chairman of the Vermont Democratic Party from 1977 to 79. In 2010, he was elected to the Vermont State Senate from Windham County, where he served 2 terms until 2014, and this March announced that he was going to be a candidate for the governorship running as a Democrat. Next, we have Bruce Lisman, who is originally from Burlington, Vermont, currently residing in Shelburne. After attending the University of Vermont, he went to work in the financial services industry in New York City, holding several important posts in several securities firms, finishing as the co-head of global equities, at Bear Stearns in 2008, when he returned to Vermont and helped found the advocacy group Campaign for Vermont. This organization has commented frequently on issues facing the state since 2011. And last fall, Mr. Lisman announced that he was running for the governorship, and this will be his first try for public office. Susan Minter is a Democrat. She is from Waterbury, Vermont. She served 4 terms in the Vermont House of Representatives from 2004 to 2010, representing the towns of Waterbury, Duxbury, Huntington, and Buell's Gore. And at the end of this session, you're going to tell me, where is Buell's Gore?
Special place.
I thought I heard of every town in Vermont by now, but I don't think I've heard of Buell's Gore
It's at
before.
the Appalachian Gap.
Okay. She was named the Deputy Secretary of Transportation in 2011, served as the Chief Recovery Officer after Tropical Storm Irene in 2011. In January of 2015, she was named as the Secretary of Transportation, stepped down from that post the following September to after she announced her bid for the governorship. Okay, without I think any further ado, let's get to our first question. Oh, one thing. We will probably have an opportunity for a round of applause for all the candidates at the end of this forum tonight, but it occurred to me that it would be appropriate at this moment to sort of honor the fact that these folks are stepping up to offer their public service to the state. Running for public office is a difficult and not an easy task. Anyone who has seen the inside of a political campaign knows that it is a grueling experience, and many times it involves financial sacrifice. And I think before we begin our discussion tonight, it would be nice to honor these folks for their willingness to step forward and serve our state as its Chief Executive Officer. Thank you very much. Okay, without any further ado, let's get to our questions. The first one, Mr. Dunn. Public school choice is currently a random advantage available to about 20% of the state's students. If elected, would you consider making that a universal privilege available to all students across the state?
So thank you for the question. I actually believe that we have a very, very strong educational system, K-12, in our state. And I believe that part of that system is that it has a mosaic of educational offerings around the state and educational arrangements between different communities. And I actually am a believer that the current balance is just right. I live in the town of Heartland, which has chosen not to have its own high school or affiliate with another high school. We have a K-8 school, which we are very connected to. But because we have sacrificed the ability to have direct democratic influence over another high school, we have also retained the ability to be a tuition town. And we have always had it that way. And in fact, the student body is evenly divided in where they go among public schools in the particular area. So I believe that other towns have benefited dramatically from having the ability to have a union school where everyone is in and connected. And I think that that local decision and local decision process is very, very important. I will say this. While I understand why Act 46 was introduced, I have been a critic of many aspects of it from the time that it was passed first in the House. And that's because I don't believe a 900 student governance unit works for all parts of Vermont. And I feel that it didn't focus on the best possible educational outcomes for all Vermonters. And because of that, I feel that we have an opportunity with a new governor to take a fresh look at how we will address education in Vermont. Thank you.
Mr. Galbraith.
I agree with Matt, and I'm not going to repeat in my short intervention his answer. I will say there's a lot of discussion about the crisis in education in our state because there are so many fewer students now than there were 50 years ago. But I think of Leland and Gray, where my girlfriend at the time taught, and it was a pretty provincial place. Today, at the same high school, kids study Mandarin and they go to China. So yes, we have fewer students. We're still spending about the same percentage of our state GDP on education, which is 5%.
Mr. Lisbon.
Yes, I like choice. The more choices we have, the more robust the possibilities. And I think school choice is something I would encourage. I think it needs to be introduced slowly, but this time with some real study. Act 46 was notable for the absence of real research, which is why I think it's a bill that failed and should be repealed. The sooner the better. Thank you.
Ms. Pinter.
Well, I think education is the most important thing we can do for building our future. And I am, as a mom of two kids who have gone through our public schools, so proud of the strong schools that we have in our state. I do not want to do anything to undermine these. I think this wonderful school where I've had the chance of visiting is a great example of how the limited choice we have is supporting great education and great communities. My goal would be to support the choice we have. I think we have balance.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Galbraith. 2 minutes for this question. What is your plan for your first 90 days in office should you win?
The very first thing that I'm going to do, the first item of legislation will be legislation to raise the minimum wage in Vermont to $15 an hour. There's a lot of discussion about affordability, but the question is, for whom is Vermont not affordable? It is not affordable for those at the bottom of the income spectrum. And frankly, I got into this race because there was no discussion of these issues of fairness in our society. Let me just give a statistic. If you work at McDonald's 50 weeks a year, 40 hours a week, you will make less in Vermont with a higher minimum wage than the average in the country, less than $20,000 a year. The CEO of McDonald's makes $7.9 million a year. And if I can quote a noted economist, John Kenneth Galbraith, who happened to be my father, the salary of the chief executive of a large corporation is not a market award for achievement. It is frequently in the nature of a warm, personal gesture by the individual to himself. We have an unfair system. The unfair system shows up in a lot of different ways. The legislature loves to enact special tax breaks that invariably go to those at the top of the income spectrum. If I'm governor, another part of my program will be to repeal those special interest tax breaks. There are about $50 million worth of them. I opposed every one when I was in the Senate. I voted against every one of them. And the other thing is, we have a very unfair health care system. The CEO of Fletcher Allen, the largest health care provider in our state, earned $1.9 million a few years ago, and I think his salary must have gone up. Meanwhile, and the top 10 executives, they make $8 million collectively. Meanwhile, Vermonters struggle to pay premiums, co-pays, and deductibles even with the Affordable Care Act. That's unfair, it's wrong, and it should change.
Thank you, Mr. Galbraith. Mr. Lisman, 30 seconds.
Let me give you a quick list. Eliminate Healthcare Connect. It doesn't work. It'll never work. Move to the federal exchange. Audit Medicaid. We don't know who's in there or what it's going to cost, and we need to do it. It impacts your insurance. Slow the all-payer until everybody understands what it means and how it works and what it means to you specifically. We need to hire great managers and return to the notion of performance matters in our government. And we need a strategic budget to go along with a strategic plan. All that in 90 days.
Ms. Minter.
And 30 seconds. Okay, I am going to appoint a great cabinet and build a strong team. And that team is going to go around the state to visit you and understand from a broad perspective what your biggest challenges are and what our opportunities are. That's what we did in Irene, and it made sense. I'm going to appoint a very important special person, an opiate abuse chief, someone who will be at the governor's office understanding and thinking 24/7 about this critical issue that I think is overwhelming our state. I'm going to present a balanced budget and Vermont promise, which you'll hear more about later.
To be continued. Matt Dunn.
So the first thing I'm going to do is introduce an ethics and campaign finance reform package, because unfortunately we have lost a lot of trust in our state. It will ban direct corporate contributions, and it will actually bring an ethics panel, which is long overdue, to our state so we can start to build trust again. The second is an economic development package that will include a $15 minimum wage, rolling out broadband, actually rolling it out to the last mile of the state, cell phone and broadband, and do 2 revenue bonds for housing, because we have a housing crisis.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, Bruce Lisman. Do you think Act 46 should be repealed? I think I know the answer to that one, but I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, Act 46 is a really bad piece of legislation. The people of Vermont, those who paid their property taxes, even those who were done with it, were done with their children being in school, were angry about the rise of property taxes, 6 to 7% per year. Seemed high to everyone, but the absolute levels of it became unnecessarily burdensome. Vermonters began talking about this in 2011. In 2012, the governor and the legislature took $24 million from the education fund to plug a hole in the budget, which would set off a chain reaction of higher property taxes, so they weren't listening. Under more pressure, Act 46, without proper research, without real context, was written, and I would say most of the legislators involved in it weren't completely sure of its consequences. Sometimes that's okay, but in this case, a bad idea. It limits choice. It moves a local control further, limits local control in a considerable fashion. It would lower someone's taxes but raise somebody else's for the hope of real savings. Mind you, there's no evidence of it. As Matt said, 900 ideal kids in a district is in no literature that we could find anywhere. It was simply a made-up number, emblematic of the kind of work that was done underneath that bill. So I'd urge you to tell your legislator and tell anybody else that Act 46 doesn't work, and for that reason I would say I'd urge the legislature to repeal it and consider alternatives. Thank you.
Okay. Sue Minter.
I would not repeal Act 46, but I will ask that we become very flexible about how it continues to be implemented. Our district, my community, just voted over 80% to unify. We had 7 boards, 7 budgets, all different for 1,800 students. For us, pulling together as one budget is going to create better quality, better outcomes, and better efficiency. This is not the case everywhere. We need to be no one size fits all. We need to be flexible.
Matt Dunn.
I wouldn't move immediately repeal. It doesn't really make sense to do so because I think some of the incentives that allowed for mergers like the one in Sue's district to happen are good because merging is really difficult. And if you want to do it right, you've got to have some resources to do it. But I would do some major surgery. And the 900 student target cap, whatever you want to call it, doesn't make sense. I would move forward with some efficiencies of rolling up payroll for all of these schools to Montpelier, because you would save a lot of back-end costs and you could focus the dollars on teaching.
Mr. Galbraith.
If I had been in the Senate, I would have voted against Act 46, but it became the law, and you can't simply shift educational policy on the dime. I share the criticisms that are made of it, that there's no evidence of savings. I would get rid of the caps. I think one of the biggest costs of Act 46 is the loss of this extraordinary volunteer network that we have in the state of Vermont, where our state functions on volunteers who fulfill the position of school boards and select people and all sorts of other positions. And that's just a critical asset that is not accomplished when you consolidate and professionalize.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question goes to Sue Minter. What would you do if elected with Vermont Health Connect?
Vermont Health Collect is a very serious challenge, and my goal and top priority is going to be to make it functional. We have got a serious problem with health care, and it is not just with Health Connect, but also with the cost and how we continue to contain costs and move towards universal care. Vermonters deserve better than what has happened with Vermont Health Connect. We have to really look under the hood and figure out how to make it functional. But in addition, we need to think about controlling costs, because when we look at the cost drivers of our family budgets, our school budgets, and even our state budget, it is really the dramatically rising cost of healthcare that is really crippling us. And if we don't get a handle on this, we will not have a sustainable economy. So how do we do that? We start to look, instead of towards how many payments based on visits and procedures and pills that a doctor or provider can offer, we need to move towards incentives to outcomes, health, outcomes, and quality. When we do that, we can start to have a more integrated system of care that is dealing with health and not sickness. Think about it. A hospital manages its budget when all of its beds are full. But what we need is to have beds empty. And we need to create incentives for health and integrated care. That's going to be critical. And I also want to get back to our discussion about how we have universal care, looking at primary care or considering expanding Dr. Dinosaur to age 26 so we can make sure that the people who need the health care the most can get it at the right time.
Thank you. Matt Dunn.
Part of my career was helping grow a Vermont-based software company to over 100 employees, and for the last 8.5 years I've been at Google. And people used to ask, what does having an IT background have to do with being in government? Well, they're not asking that anymore. I will bring together the team that will fix the damn website, make sure we move to funding public health, get us back on the path to universal health care, because the cost of health care is going up $650,000 a day. That is not sustainable. I served on the board of Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center for the last 3 years. I can get it done.
Mr. Galbraith.
The first thing I would do is to hire Matt Dunn to fix the website.
You would be so lucky.
Well, I hope you would continue to want to serve the state. I'd serve you if you were governor, if you asked for something. But in any event,
thank you for the offer.
That's the first thing I do. It isn't so easy just to get off the exchange, because you will have to have it at least for another year, because you can't shift in the middle of the year. Beyond that, I want to move to. I'm the only person who introduced legislation to actually pay for universal publicly financed health care. More on that later.
Thank you. Mr. Lisman.
Yes, so I've already said we should kill Healthcare Connect. $250 million to get it so far. It does not work. It'll never work. $56 million to maintain it, and they're overdue for upgrades, which they probably shouldn't begin. And so I would make the gradual transition. Mind you, you have to stabilize it and then move it to the federal exchange. It's a shame, but it shows more than anything else that a working government, a government that works for you, is really important, and we just forgot that until we saw this disaster. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, next question. Back to Mr. Dunn there. Do you have any proposals to increase the availability of technical or vocational education available to students who, for whatever reason, choose a non-traditional college path?
Absolutely. And in fact, it's not going to be necessarily in our VOTEC schools, although I think our VOTEC schools are doing a good job and can be expanded. But it's actually integrating it throughout the curriculum. One of the experiences that I've had over the last 5 years is a teacher in Hartford who had a group of students that were considered difficult students, and he had to teach them history somehow. So he taught them all how to use SketchUp to do three-dimensional rendering. They all did three-dimensional renderings of the historic downtown buildings in White River Junction, Vermont. They tried to upload it to Google Earth. I'm sitting in the office in White River Junction, and I get a call from Mountain View, California, at Google headquarters, and they say, "Hey, do you know where Hartford is?" This group of students just did amazing work. Flew the entire class out and the teacher and had them lecture to a group this size of engineers on how to use three-dimensional rendering in the classroom. This has now become a statewide competition, and one that is incredibly powerful because it is teaching people all the way across the board how to use tools for our future. That's what we can integrate into our school system, along with making sure that every sixth grader learns how to code, which is the language of our future, and to be able to make sure that individuals feel that going into trades, whether it's welding, farming, electrical work, is a superb career choice because you can make a real living at it and make a difference in your state. That's the kind of school reform that I intend to do. But you have to be able to do that in a collaborative way, and in addition, you have to make sure that there's a clear avenue to our fantastic Vermont Technical College, and make sure that there is a way that people can go there tuition-free. And the proposal that I've made is that anyone who does 2 years of national service in AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, or the military service would be able to graduate from one of our state colleges, Vermont Technical College or UVM, debt-free.
Mr. Galbraith.
The answer is yes. But let me say I've been to a number of these forums, and what you hear is, whatever the issue is, a lot of suggestions, a lot of things that people want to do. But what you don't hear is how you're going to pay for it. And frankly, it means nothing to talk about expanding health care unless you're going to talk about how to pay for it. It means nothing to talk about vocational education unless you're going to discuss how to pay for it. And so I'm prepared to come forward and say how we're going to pay for it. And I have identified $50 million in special interest tax breaks that should be repealed and that will strengthen the public services in our state.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lisman.
Well, this is a big deal. And so one of the three super priorities I have for that strategic budget are, one of them is workforce development. I'd have one person running it. Today it's scattered across agencies and departments. We don't even have a universal budget. The private sector is demanding it. They know what they need, but the state hasn't yet given it to them. So I have in mind a stretch from the state college system back to vocational schools, and even earlier for those, instead of focusing on juniors and sophomores who would like to go to college and giving them the opportunity alone, those who want to be in the trades, let's give them a chance to see the trades. My guess is that hardly anybody has a plumber under the age of 70 today.
Ms. Mentor.
We have the second highest high school graduation rates in the country, but when it comes to post-secondary, we are at the bottom of the pack. And this is the key opportunity because 2/3 of the jobs require some education and training after high school. That's why I rolled out Vermont Promise. 2 years of tuition-free college at CCV, Community College of Vermont, or Vermont Technical College. This is a program that's going to give the next generation of Vermonters who need the help the most the opportunity to get jobs and economic opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, next question goes to Peter Galbraith. He'll have 2 minutes to answer this one. Why is Vermont in general not competitive in attracting business and jobs that pay well? And if elected, what will you do about that? How will you do it?
Well, I challenge the premise of the question. Let's ask the question, why would anybody want to open a business in Vermont? We have high taxes, some of the critics say. We have all those terrible regulations. Well, the answer why anybody would want to open a business in Vermont is that it's a great place to live. And in fact, 98% of our new jobs are homegrown. Why is it a great place to live? Because of the beautiful environment, which we see around here and almost every place in our state. And why do we have the beautiful environment? It's because of those environmental regulations. And why is it a great place to live? It's because of the excellent schools. It's because of it's one of the safest places to live. It's because we're the second healthiest state. It's because we care about one another. And that's paid for by those high taxes. And this is, as economists say, our comparative advantage. We cannot compete with New Hampshire for low taxes, even if we cut our taxes in half. We shouldn't want to compete with Mississippi for low wages. So let's focus on our comparative advantage. Instead, we have an economic development policy that's based on giveaways to large corporations. The legislature gave $5 million to facilitate a $1.5 billion deal between IBM and Global Foundries. In order to do so, it cut benefits for disabled Vermonters, as if $5 million would make a slightest bit of difference to a $1.5 billion deal between IBM, which had $11 billion in cash on hand, Global Foundries, owned by Abu Dhabi, concerning billions of dollars of infrastructure. We gave $10 million to Green Mountain coffee growers Keurig. And you know what they did? They said, thank you very much. And they moved their coffee buying business to Switzerland at a cost of 200 Vermont jobs. I'm not against incentives, but they won't be gifts. They will be loans or equity participation. The company does well, Vermont will do well. You wouldn't participate on the basis that Vermont does, and the state shouldn't either.
Thank you, Mr. Galbraith. Mr. Lisman.
Yeah, well, you know, because you're in southern Vermont, that the economy here has slipped away. It's older, it's thinner, it's more fragile, and other parts of the state feel the same. 9 of our counties have lost population. Some of it's cold weather, some of it's our age, but a lot of it is that young men and women aren't here anymore. There's lots we can do to change that without giving money away to corporations. But we ought to get to know our employers. We ought to hold on to some more of our 44,000 college kids who are here. We ought to also, I'm going to leave it there.
You'll have another
It's an
chance,
opportunity to
I'm
finish it.
sure.
Thank you.
Ms. Minter.
I've learned a lot traveling, especially here in the southern part of the state, and learning about your Southern Vermont Economic Development Zone, speaking with folks involved in economic development. And after that, came up with an economic development strategy. It's called Invest Vermont and Innovate Vermont, focusing on revitalizing our downtowns and village centers through infrastructure investments, strategic investments that I've seen create economic opportunity in other communities, and to look at 4 key sectors of innovation and opportunity that I see as critical to the future.
Mr. Dunn.
So the first thing we need to do is actually have the infrastructure that will attract jobs, and that is broadband, which is the electricity of our time. You will not see businesses or employees coming to a place which has slow DSL or satellite connection. And in fact, if we do deliver on the promise of high-speed internet to the last mile, we can become the telecommuting capital of the world. We can then invest in our homegrown entrepreneurs, which is where our job creation has come traditionally, to be able to grow jobs and then be able to incentivize investment in in-state entrepreneurs.
Okay. Next question goes to
Let's see.
Mr. Lisman. What will you do to keep the growth of state expenditures within the growth of the state economy? 2 minutes.
Well, yes, I've proposed that with the budget grow for the next 3 years so we can recharge our ability to spend money on big projects, opiate addiction, workforce development, and the mandated cleanup of our waters, including Lake Champlain, growing the budget at about 2% a year, finding efficiencies, with a talented management team, working with the employees of the state. I think we can find 1 to 1.5% efficiencies. After all, we're talking about a budget that's in excess of $5 billion.
With the opportunity to do that, we can also think about creating a strategic plan / strategic budget. GE had a strategic plan that was no more than a page long. When I ran a business, it was 3/4 of a page long. But a strategic budget, prioritizing 3 most important things we need to do. The secondary issues of, say, 5 issues, and finally another 7 or 8 that we need to be aware of and maintain, gives us a chance to take the budget out of the hands of advocates and lobbyists and make this a budget that would actually serve a purpose. And mind you, the value of knowing the cost of reaching a goal is the value of knowing why we did it to begin with. And so what's been a failure in the budget process in the last 6 years is they've spent money at a rate of 5% a year when the economy's been growing at less than 2% a year. And the difference is about $700 million in higher taxes, fees, and surcharges, the cost of living. That's what you pay for. So under my plan, we're talking about something considerably more logical, bringing the economy into play as a budget process, but also thinking about the investment dollars we need to make in the next 2 or 3 years in some really big projects. Thank you.
Sue Minter.
Well, I'm committed to a balanced budget, and one of the reasons I'm running for governor is because I've been working in the second largest agency of state government, balancing a $600 million budget and managing a workforce of 1,300 people and focusing on innovation and efficiency. Just one example, we started the Accelerated Bridge Project. We went from an average of building bridges that took 8 years to just an average of 2 years. We're building them faster, cheaper, and smarter. I've gotten it done in state government in a very large bureaucracy. I can get it done in other bureaucracies and give you greater value for your tax dollar.
Matt Dunn.
So I served on the Appropriations Committee, and I know how to balance a budget. And it's not an easy thing to do, and it's full of hard choices, but we did it, and we can get back to doing it again. What we need is clearly a plan. And a plan shouldn't be based on a set number, because I think we are desperately underinvested in our core infrastructure. The good news is that there are bonding instruments using revenue bonds that can allow us to invest in housing, in efficiency work across the state, and in high-speed internet that doesn't affect the general fund and would not hit our bond cap. We need it in order to get back on track.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Mr. Galbraith.
I will propose a budget that does what needs to be done to provide for quality education, health care, to protect our environment, and to keep our community safe. And I will propose the taxes that are going to be required to do it. And let me say something about efficiency. I voted in every election in Vermont since 1971. And in every campaign, the politicians come, they're going to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. They're going to make government more efficient. It still hasn't happened. And the reason it hasn't happened is that it's not easy, and it's not going to be done now either.
Okay. Next question goes to Sue Minter. 2 minutes. Bennington County is the only part of Vermont within 45 minutes drive of the 1.2 million people and markets in the Albany Capital District area and beyond. Bennington has tried for years to have regular rail service restored without success. Yet recently money has been allocated to restore rail service between Rutland, a city of 17,000, and Burlington, a city of perhaps 45,000. How do you explain the logic of that decision?
So there has been money spent on extending the existing Amtrak service from Rutland to Burlington, but it is part of a long-term plan to bring service as well as we can from Bennington and off to Albany. And that's why I invested in a very significant study that has given us detailed plans on exactly how much it's going to cost and what it needs to be done. And that's why we started with a brand new bus service. Of course, before in the previous administration, the bus services were completely eliminated. We created a bus to get from people from Burlington all the way to Bennington and to Albany. But now we've started giving your county special dollars for a new bus service to go back and forth to Bennington, once from Bennington to Albany. And this is going to be part of the Amtrak service. So there is a bid right now to decide, is that service going to be literally Amtrak that does it so that you're meeting the Amtrak train in Albany, or do we want a bus service that's actually going to go to the airport and to the train station? This is going to be an opportunity for you in this county to make that connection with Albany. We get it. It's critically important that we look beyond our borders. I think there's great opportunity for Bennington County in Albany and in the RPI and the special investments that they're making. And I think that Bennington, downtown, needs greater investment in its infrastructure. I'm excited about the Ninja Path that I helped fund to create a bicycle path that's going to connect North Bennington to Bennington. And now with this new rail plan to get a bus service extending hopefully to rail when we can afford that, but to get going to connect these two wonderful centers and bring commerce and economic opportunity from Albany into Bennington County. I know how much you need it, and I will continue to work on build upon what I've already done as secretary, investing in your critical transportation infrastructure.
Thank you. Matt Dunn.
When I was in the House, Amtrak threatened to cancel all rail service to Vermont. And I was vice chair of the Transportation Committee. And I was sent out to Chicago to negotiate how to make sure we kept rail service in Vermont. And what we came back with was not only rail service on the eastern side, but we brought rail service into Rutland. And serving on that committee, we actually bought rail. The state of Vermont bought rail lines in New York to make sure that we had our ownership over our future destiny. As governor, I will deliver on that promise that we started to bring rail service to Bennington County.
Mr. Galbraith.
I support rail, but in order to have effective rail service, you have to have more than one train a day. You need to have multiple trains, and that's a big problem. I think as we look to the other problem living in a rural state is wherever the public transportation only gets you so far, you then got to get home, and it usually isn't a walk. And so what I'd like to do is to develop an Uber-like capacity as we build out broadband, which we need to do, so that people can have ride sharing, you can have safe driving and safe passenger protocols. You know the person who's picking you up has been vetted, and you know the passenger picking up, and that can get people to more remote areas.
Thank you, Mr. Galbraith. Mr. Lisbon.
Yeah, as you were asking the question, I felt a sense of resentment that Bennington wasn't being included, thus joining just about all of you in feeling that way. Whatever happened to Bennington County? Well, one thing is that governors and the legislature sometimes forget Bennington County and other southern parts of the state. I want to tell you that one of the favorite places of my youth was, in fact, Bennington, as we visited our relatives in town. So as a governor, I would make sure that southern Vermont, not just Bennington County, but the rest of the southern rim would be very much a part of the center of Vermont in what I do.
Okay, thank you very much. Back to Matt Dunn now. Energy-related question here. What is your approach to energy policy in terms of dealing with the competing interests between wind and solar and preserving the landscape? A question that is much in the minds of our legislators at the moment.
Yes, as they are working through, hopefully, a fix of the legislation, but actual passage of the legislation. So look, climate change is the biggest threat, not only to our state and our state economy, but to mankind. We absolutely have to continue to move away from fossil fuels. And I believe that Vermont needs to do our part. And in fact, when about a year ago, before the governor had decided formally not to run, my friend Bill McKibben brought me over to Middlebury and said, Matt, I don't think Peter's going to run. I want you to run because we need to get this state unstuck. And it is absolutely important that we continue down the path to 90% renewable energy by 2050. Now, there are ways that we can do that. And I believe that solar is the first objective. The second objective is actually doing efficiency work. And that's why I introduced the Green Jobs Fund. And what it is that it's a bond. We believe we can put up $100 million that would go towards doing efficiency work in apartment buildings around the state. Because right now, landlords have zero interest in actually doing efficiency work because they pass on the utilities to the people who live there. And if you do that, what you do is you then pay down the bond by a part of the difference between the utility bill before the efficiency work is done and after. sometimes known as an ESCO in the financial markets. It's used all over the place. We can do it here and bring $100 million stimulus that actually creates jobs across the state, makes multi-unit housing more affordable, and will reduce our carbon footprint dramatically.
Mr. Galbraith.
This is a huge question, hard to answer in 30 seconds. I've had a long history of being concerned with climate change and worked on the very first treaty to address it back in 1987. I would like to have us buy the dams on the Connecticut River. That would meet 1/3 of our need for new renewable energy. Efficiency is the most important thing we can do because you get at least $10 of carbon reduction for efficiency as compared to what you get for 10 times the efficiency for every dollar as compared to wind or solar, and I am opposed to new industrial wind because it is environmentally destructive and it is never wanted by the communities where it's stuck.
Mr. Lisman.
Yes, I asked for a moratorium, 2-year moratorium on large wind and large solar, leaving the smaller projects again in the normal process. And I did that because I thought incentives had made the only winner in the state the developers. It wasn't changing the nature of our environment, but it was negatively impacting the environment around our lakes, rivers, and streams. And I thought a good democracy would reflect the will of the majority, but also protect those in the minority, i.e. the towns and people who live in small towns who don't have the kind of money to defend themselves against big wind and big solar projects. And it's not fair. So I asked for a moratorium. Thank you.
Ms. Mentor.
I'm committed to renewable energy. For me, climate change is not just real, it is here. I was in the eye of Tropical Storm Irene. I know many of you were too. And I know that renewable energy is not only building jobs in this economy, but good, well-paying jobs. 1 in 17 people now involved in the energy and efficiency field in Vermont. We need to keep it growing because we need the jobs. It's reducing people's costs for paying for energy, and it's reducing our carbon footprint. And it's not, I just was in Rutland looking at solar on rooftops and a micro hydro project in North Bennington.
Thank you very much. I realize it must be frustrating to try and answer complicated questions comprehensively and thoroughly in 30 seconds, but I'm sure you'll all have an opportunity later on to expand upon some of these short answers you're giving now. Anyway, on to Mr. Galbraith. You've got the next question here. The legislature in 2015 authorized the Southern Vermont Economic Development Zone. A 9-person team delivered a report to the legislature on issues in the zone. A key recommendation was to fund the Southern Vermont Sustainable Recruitment and Marketing Project. What will you do to fund this project?
I think we need to, we are not going to be able to spend our way out of the economic development problem that we face. You know, the state, I mean, let me be honest about it, because everybody's going to talk about these wonderful jobs they're going to bring into the state. But the reality is that the state of Vermont is subject to the same macroeconomic and demographic trends as the rest of the country. Now, that's not probably what anybody wants to hear, but it is simply true. So we're not going to, we don't have surplus resources the way the federal government does that can have a stimulus package. What we do at the margin. And that is why the place that I believe we should focus is on maintaining the high quality of life in Vermont. Basically, it means the basics. It means the schools, it means the health care, the hospitals like Grace Cottage, which strengthen a rural community. It means the public safety. And again, it means, therefore, having an adequate revenue base to do that. The way we win is by being an attractive place to live and by expanding, by having 21st century technology. You cannot live you can't expect people to operate without having both cell phone and very fast internet. But if we do, people in the 21st century, people can telecommute. And that really is the economic development program. There are a lot of things that are window dressing. Yes, we can fund them. We can recruit people in. But the reality is, the issues are more fundamental, and so we need to keep the focus on the big things, which is the quality of life in Vermont.
Thank you, Mr. Lisman.
Well, one, a good plan deserves to be rewarded, and so I think it should be. Second, I think the business community in Vermont generally and the southern rim of the state needs to step up and say they are going to start helping in a big way, in a way different than over the last 15 or 20 years. And third, I'd say one of the really important themes we need to keep in mind is holding on to the jobs we have. I worry about Energizer in Bennington because Energizer in St. Albans left after being here quite a long time. That means building relationships with our employers so that when they're ready to grow, they'll grow here. If they're ready to restructure, we can help them do it right here.
Ms. Minter.
I was excited to meet with economic development officials and a business roundtable to discuss the Southern Vermont Economic Development Zone strategy. I'm excited that Bennington is connecting with Wyndham and that we're seeing the opportunity. I will, as governor, help make sure you get a comprehensive economic development strategy so that you can access more federal dollars to bring to this. I believe in this marketing plan because I will be a champion for Vermont, not just as a tourism destination, but as a great place to live, grow a business, and raise your family. Marketing works.
Matt Dunn.
I read the preliminary report and found it incredibly sobering that we've seen an increase of poverty in Bennington County of 50%. And we need to take action, and we need to take it quickly. And I'm actually more optimistic than Peter is on what we can do about it. And part of it is empowering local groups who get together, who say, we want to take ownership of moving our region forward. I would fund that proposal. I would follow the recommendations that would come out of it. I would build broadband to the last mile, and I would do partnerships to bring entrepreneurs, including a partnership with RPI, which is right over the border and can bring innovation to our region.
Thank you. Okay, next question goes to Bruce Lisman. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but this was an opportunity to maybe expand upon that earlier answer. Medicaid is a growing problem in the state, paying for it in particular. How will you be able to finance the increased costs of Medicaid?
Yes, well, right now you're paying for it in the form of much higher insurance premiums. The real cost of health care, ex drugs, pharmaceuticals, is really no more than 2 to 4% in most parts of the country, and presumably that's about what we're growing at. Pharmaceuticals growing at a rate of better than 8% and maybe as high as 12%. All the data is really delayed in receipt. The big increase in healthcare costs is really insurance and insurance premiums and deductibles. That's what we view as the cost of healthcare. That's not the raw cost. And the reason why that's taken place, the separation, the difference between, say, 2 or 4% and as much as 10 to 12% in your insurance premiums, in the main is because of the Medicaid enrollment. It was done without a plan to pay for it. We have a very high administrative cost. We have a large group of people. We don't understand exactly whether they're eligible or not. We don't know what benefits they use. We don't know if they're healthier for being in the Medicaid group. And we don't know if their access to health care is the same as it was before or better. 2 studies, one in North Carolina, turned a large deficit into a surplus after doing an important audit. Another study in Oregon discovered that 10,000 people enrolled were neither healthier or had better access to it, raising questions about the real cost of administration for that program. These are the kind of things we need to do. I've been calling for this for quite a while, and it seems obvious to me with the news over the last few days that a significant number of people are not eligible. And I've already met people on the campaign trail who say, listen, I volunteered to get out of there. I am definitely not eligible, and it's hard to get a response. And so common sense says that one of the things we should do is audit Medicaid, and that has a direct impact on what you will pay for insurance. Thank you.
Sue Minter.
Well, what I want to know, I want to make sure that everyone understands that Medicaid is a provision of health care for those who are most needing it in terms of their economics. And so I feel it's important to recognize that we now have 96% of Vermonters actually have insurance. A lot of it is due to our expansion of our Medicaid rolls. And if there are people who are no longer eligible, certainly they should be taken off. But I don't want to kick anyone off of Medicaid who needs access to health care. Because when we had 10% of our population uninsured, the costs only went up. We need to insure everyone.
Matt Dunn.
The major problem with Medicaid is that it still uses a fee-for-service mechanism. And when I was on the board of Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center, which was committed to public health, we would still end each quarter trying to figure out how to fill more hospital beds and get people to use our MRI machines. That's crazy. That's why the cost overall of healthcare is continuing to go up. We need to actually pay for public health, not number of procedures, and we need to continue on the track to universal health care. We also need to do bulk purchasing of prescription drugs to take our economies of scale to lower costs on prescription drugs.
Mr. Galbraith.
Well, one reason that the administrative costs are so high is that Dartmouth-Hitchcock pays its CEO more than $1 million a year, and it pays its other top executives astronomical sums, and the UVM system's even worse, with the top 10 executives making $8 million. And that I think is very hard to justify. So we need to, and these are not publicly supported nonprofits. They virtually the greatest part of their money comes from the taxpayers. We need to also move toward universal publicly financed health care.
Okay, next question goes to Sue Minter. Market rate and affordable, adequate housing is a significant issue in southern Vermont. What will you do, if elected, to improve that situation?
So my program called Invest Vermont is about bringing greater investment into the critical infrastructure that is needed to grow our downtowns and villages. And part of that infrastructure is affordable housing. And so I will, as a starting point, fully fund VHCB and partner with the various wonderful affordable housing organizations that are already needing to grow. We will also be expanding efficiency into those affordable units that I've been able to visit around this state. But it isn't just affordable units that we need. I think we need investment and growth in every level of housing. And so part of my investment in infrastructure is actually trying to make it affordable for developers to not have to pay for this infrastructure, meaning the water and wastewater systems, but in fact having the government bond for that infrastructure so that developers it will reduce their costs so that we can continue to grow in our compact village centers with our working landscape, but that we cut some of those costs to developers so that they start building more supply. The reason costs are so high is because we have inadequate supply at every level of the market. So I'm going to focus first on affordable housing through that kind of investment, secondarily also in moderately priced housing, and in home ownership opportunities for first-time home buyers, so that you don't have to have the extent of capital and capacity to get your first home. Housing and secure housing is so critical to everyone. Having visited the homeless shelters in this state, seeing what's happening, not just to people who are in homelessness, but people who can't afford to come here, especially young people. It's critical to our economy, it's critical to economic security, and it's critical to our economic prosperity. Housing will be a very high priority for me, as it has been. I worked for 10 years in the Department of Housing for this state. I know a lot about how to make it happen, and I will do that as your governor.
Matt Dunn.
Over the last 5 years at Google, I was involved with investing over $500 million in affordable housing through low-income housing tax credits. There is capital that's out there to be able to do this. But we have to move quickly, and we have to move now. That's why I've proposed dedicating a revenue stream to the Housing Authority to be able to capitalize a bond to get us caught up. Because it won't come from an allocation, even doing what we're supposed to do in our transfer to VHCB. We have to do it aggressively. We can invite outside capital to help, and we can solve the housing problem in Vermont.
Mr. Galbraith.
There are two ways to make housing more affordable, and I certainly would support fully funding VHCB. But the better way to make housing more affordable is for people to earn more so that they can afford the housing. And that's why the first thing I will do as governor is to propose the $15 minimum wage. And of course, you've raised the minimum wage for those at the bottom, you're going to raise other wages as well, and that will make housing more affordable.
Mr. Lisbon.
So the population of our state is largely unchanged. Only a couple of counties are having any growth at all. And remember, the population's gotten seriously older. And so if you wonder about the supply of housing, there's something here that's not least of which is affordability, the nature of regulation. I believe in Act 250, Dean Davis, an idol of mine, actually did it, Republican. But we need to make it a little easier. And we need to make it easier in places like southern Vermont that are really sensitive to this issue, as well as Chittenden County, where we have a city that centers it, but the lack of availability of housing are forcing people out of the area.
Thank you, Mr. Lisman. Okay, next question goes back to Matt Dunn. How would you change the state's role in addressing the narcotic and opioid crisis currently facing the state?
So the heroin addiction problem in this state is at an epidemic proportion. And it used to be about them, and it's now clearly about all of us. And we need to take on this issue head on. And I actually laud Governor Shumlin for having brought this issue forward in bright lights to say we have a problem. What we need to do now is invest and have a strategy for solving it. The first thing that I would do is make sure that we are funding beds, because right now in some parts of the state, it is a 300-day wait to get a treatment bed when a person has a moment of clarity, and that's unacceptable. The second is we need to invest in prevention. If we invested a fraction of what we invested in smoking cessation, in prevention of heroin, we could prevent thousands of young people from even considering starting down the path to heroin addiction. The third thing that we need to do is put community organizers on the ground. Having worked with this kind of an issue when I was the head of AmeriCorps Vista, I know the impact that can have from preventing the epidemic from spreading from household to household. And the final piece we need to do is take on the medical establishment that is insisting on overprescription of opioids. And it is unbelievably devastating to read recent reports that pharmaceutical companies, knowing that opioids did not do anything about pain after the first or second day, to continue to recommend it for much larger doses over a period of time. We need to make sure that opioids are the last choice for pain, not the first, and to look for alternatives to make sure that the opioid abuse doesn't take away a generation of Vermonters.
Mr. Galbraith.
I agree with everything that Matt said, but he didn't discuss one thing, which is how to pay for it. Finding beds, prevention, community organizers, this is going to cost money. And I'm prepared to raise the money to do it, and I think there's a way to do it by, again, getting rid of special interest tax breaks that overwhelmingly benefit people at the top of the income spectrum, many of which have no economic rationale at all. For example, what is the rationale in allowing a Vermont taxpayer to deduct the mortgage interest on a home in the Caribbean? But you can do that.
Mr. Lisman.
Yeah, I think this is one of those three very important things that we'll be funding in the very near term. And so we're going to have to find funding. The successful programs in America have centered on 4 or 5 things done really well. First, there needs to be one person responsible, because this is a program that runs through just about every conceivable department and agency of the government and all those designated agencies in our communities. Second, most of those successful programs are well policed. That means police forces that are visible. And second, a judicial system that gets it, if I might. Third, a mental health system that's more robust, counselors that are there, and finally, care on demand. When an addict wants to change and get his life back, that's the moment to give it to him.
Ms. Minter.
So as governor, I'm going to appoint a special person to be my direct contact at the governor's office, just as I was during Irene, where I was thinking 24/7 across all the jurisdictions, because like Irene, this is a crisis. It's affecting every community and so many families, having met now many people trying to get off of these addictions, and at the opiate treatment centers. I was just in Rutland visiting with Project Vision, a group which has come all in. This community has been all in and making a huge difference by working together across all the sectors. We can follow that vision.
Thank you. Kind of a related question, following on that one, and this one goes to Mr. Galbraith. If you're elected governor, would you be in favor and support the decriminalization of marijuana?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Lisman.
Okay, you want me to say something more, fill up 2 minutes? But the simple fact is that, it's not as if legalization of marijuana is going to cause Vermonters to all of a sudden start smoking marijuana. I have news for you. It's already happening. And in fact, 60 or 70 years of prohibition have not worked. So clearly, we're going to be much better off legalizing it. And in fact, I don't smoke, but I think if I did, I'd probably have to go to one of my children to figure out how to obtain it. And I think it would be a lot better if it were sold in the manner in which alcohol is, so that where there are your IDs, and it will be harder for minors to get marijuana. I think it is something that it's already going on. It's a potential source of revenues to the state. By legalizing, you will guarantee purity of product, and you will be better able to keep it out of the hands of minors. I wouldn't be as restrictive as the proposed legislation was. I think as long as you can meet the criteria of keeping it away from minors, purity of product, and of course to ensure revenues, then I would permit a broader legalization and growing.
Mr. Lisman.
Yes, I'm opposed to it. I've written about it and spoken about it, and I'll tell you why. First, there won't be any net revenues to the state. We'll lose money doing this. They've underestimated just about everything. Second, on-the-road testing doesn't exist in a complete form yet. Third, the Colorado experience has been awful. Even the governor there is saying, be careful and go slow. Fourth, if our taxes will be sufficiently high to allow the black market to benefit from all that advertising. And finally, your local police will be growing because there'll be unexpected visitors. Thank you.
I am a supporter of legalization. I know that youth have greater access right now to marijuana than they do to alcohol, and it's because it isn't regulated. For me, there's 3 key pieces. We have to have careful regulation and distribution, starting with our medical dispensaries. Second, we have to have a robust education and prevention program. As a mom, that's the most important part for me, substance abuse education, which we haven't been having in a comprehensive way. Third, as the former Secretary of Transportation, I want to make sure we are not exacerbating our impaired driving so that we have enforcement mechanisms, including a roadside test.
Matt Dunn.
I support legalization as well, but I believe that it will actually reduce the use of marijuana in people under the age of 21. I have 3 kids, all under the age of 11, and I think about this a lot. And I believe strongly that if we do it right, we will actually be able to control it better. First dollar will go towards prevention for underage individuals and for enforcement to make sure that we land this right. I don't see it as a huge cash cow because I believe we need to do this slowly and carefully.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Okay, next question goes to Bruce Lisman. This is a point we touched upon a little bit earlier, so here's an opportunity perhaps to expand upon that answer. Many of Southern Vermont's young workers lack critical career skills, and we are not attracting the outside workforce we need. What is your plan to remedy that within your first 2 years as governor?
It's a really big deal. But it's not exclusive to Southern Vermont. It exists everywhere. Global Founders reports that they have nearly 65 jobs available daily, unable to fill them because either they can't pass a medical test or drug test, I should say, can't fill out a basic form, and can't do basic math skills. It says a lot about our education system. It says a lot about our vocational system, and so I think we need to focus on a couple of things. First, I really believe that workforce development should be reaching back for those that are completely lost on disability, have skills but aren't using them, or are lost at home, and so we need to save them and bring them back into the workforce, and we need to be able to go forward for those of a certain age that still want to work but don't have the skills to do it. There are companies in Bennington that are looking for help and are finding creative ways to do it, if you will, working with local vocational efforts that would customize, if you will, job skills. And I think that's going to be, frankly, the picture of the future. Workforce development in Vermont has not worked for a long time. We don't have a unified budget. We don't know the results. We don't track people 1, 3, or 5 years out. And the truth is, we don't have a performance standards that are equal across all those agencies, including our own state government. So we need one person to run it. We need a unified budget. We need to know how much we're spending. We need to track people 1, 3, and 5 years out, and we need to know we're getting results. Mind you, there are half a dozen states in the Southeast and Southwest that have found the answer. It's market-driven, and it can work, and it can work here. We ought to be the place that people want to come to work and to experience the lifestyle, but workforce development, our education system, and the availability of jobs is really important.
Ms. Minter.
So when I'm traveling around visiting with businesses, I hear again and again they can't find qualified workers. And right now, almost 50% of our kids aren't continuing past high school, even though 2/3 of the jobs require a post-secondary degree or training. And that's why I want to connect the dots, get more kids educated and more kids mentored to be ready for the job. My Vermont Promise program, it's modeled after 5 other states who are doing it, is giving tuition-free community college and Vermont Technical College to give them the opportunity, the mentorship, the guidance, and the internship for a job. That will keep them here.
Matt Dunn.
Career skills fit into a number of different categories, and they're changing. And so when I said before that we would do what I was able to do in other parts of the country, which is actually guarantee that every 6th grader learns how to code, I'm looking at their future, whether they're going to go into a technology job or they're going to be working as an auto mechanic, because having that understanding of basic computer knowledge is critical today. The 3-dimensional rendering program is another example of what we can do. But the other piece, I believe, comes in national service, where people can give back by learning career skills, and by doing so, in my proposal, earning their way to a debt-free higher education.
Mr. Galbraith.
So I also would want to strengthen vocational education. I would like the idea of making it possible for low and middle income Vermonters to attend the state colleges of Vermont Technical College tuition free, and there are ways to pay for that if we get rid of those special interest tax breaks. But finally, we have to remember that we are also going to have jobs that are going to be unskilled. We are still going to need people to load skiers onto the ski lifts at Stratton and Bromley, and those people ought to be earning a livable $15 an hour wage.
Okay. The final question from the table up here will go to Sue Minter, and then after we complete this round of questions and answers, it'll be your turn to ask the candidates a few questions if you have them ready to go. So you might want to sharpen the pencils and get them ready. Ms. Minter, the question here is, do you think the state has adequate financial resources to meet its long-term pension obligations?
Great question, and we need to continue to invest in our pensions. When I was in the Appropriation Committee in 2008, we had extraordinary pressure. The state revenues were plummeting, and at the same time, our investment portfolio was struggling. And we actually came up with long-term strategies at that point to start to rebuild the state pension fund as well as the teacher pension fund. They have been coming back slowly, but when you look to the long term, we still see a gap. So I believe that we need to continue in that strategic long-term investment by looking towards how we are going to continue to actually put dollars away into the fund. We have begun to increase as in an annual way more funding to go directly into our pensions, both for our state employees and our teachers. But I do think we need to ratchet it up. We can't do it all at once. We need to continue to build as we have. I will say we've come a long way in changing both the access, some of the rules for eligible members going forward, and that in the long run we have made tremendous progress relative to where we were in the Great Recession. But this is an area of long-term economic health that the next governor will absolutely need to look to, and I think I will be asking my treasurer for greater investment in that sector.
Mr. Dunn.
We currently do not, and we need to catch up. And I was very proud when I was on the Appropriations Committee that we actually took strides to be able to catch up. Recession hit, and then we had some struggles to be able to keep up with the obligations that we all know are coming. And so I will absolutely be looking towards the future to make sure that my children are not in a situation where we have defaulting pension funds. We have to catch up. I would also say that if we had divested from coal 5 years ago, our pension funds would be in much better shape today than they are now.
Mr. Galbraith.
Well, I was going to be cautious about my answer until Matt Dunn spoke for fear of affecting the state's bond rating. But so he's already said that no, we don't, so I can say no, we don't as well. We have been, the trouble is that we were unduly optimistic as to what rate of return we're going to get on our investments. Personally, I would love to have had the rate of return that's been projected. As Sue says, it has become more realistic now, but we are going to have to set aside the money. But hey, you still haven't heard how are we going to get that money, but I'm talking about it.
Mr. Lisman.
Yeah, so we spent our money really badly in the last 6 years, and maybe the last 8 years. But what do all these things have in common? The mandate to clean Lake Champlain, mandate for pre-K, the college goal, 60% of us supposed to be in college, higher education mandates. There are dozens of mandates for local and state police. And all that in common is we have a significant number of unfunded mandates. So what Montpelier does so often is have a great press conference, and everybody walks away afterwards, and we're not going to fund it, except you might at a local level.
Okay. Well, that completes the first part of our forum tonight. And as I said a moment ago, now it's your turn. We don't have a mic out in the audience, so you're going to have to speak loudly and clearly. I will try to repeat the question, if I can hear it clearly. I would recommend that you direct your question to a specific candidate. Why don't we give them each 2 minutes to answer the question? And I think we could probably allow some of the others to answer as well. But why don't we start with that? My only request would be that you do indeed ask a question as opposed to, shall we say, making a speech. We are going to try and finish on time, so if you do sort of start meandering off the point, I'll try to reel you back in. So, don't be shy. Who wants to go first? Mr. Zupan.
My question is to Mr. Galbraith. In a world where robotics are anticipated to take about 30% of the jobs in the next 20 years, and in a world where a $22,000 robot can already make 60 customized gourmet hamburgers in 1 hour, what words would you use to frame your apology to the hamburger flipper who loses a job because his employer cannot afford or will not afford to pay $15 an hour for his service?
I believe the question was, what happens when an employer is not willing to pay $15 an hour for a job? It's going to Mr. Galbraith.
I'm not going to issue an apology at all. I'm going to tell that hamburger flipper that he or she ought to make enough money so that they can have the basic essentials of life, which the owner of the hamburger chain, the CEO of McDonald's, is making $7.9 million. To me, that is unfair and wrong. And furthermore, if those robots are doing it for $22,000, well, the minimum wage in Vermont today is about $19,900 a year. So, do you suppose that those robots might become a little cheaper, and goodbye to that $10 an hour minimum wage? Are we then going to lower the minimum wage to $5 so they can outcompete the robots for a few more years until the robots are doing the work for $5 $5 an hour? No. Well, we could do that, and we could go back to the 19th century, and you and I are going to disagree. But that is that. Well, with 19th century economics. No, I'm not going to do that. You and I can disagree. Well, what I can tell you is that if I'm elected and the legislature goes along, and if I'm elected, there will be a mandate for this. The $15 minimum wage will be the law of the land in Vermont, and if an employer doesn't follow that, that employer will face sanctions. And the fact is that in this state, we also have a very low unemployment rate, so there are other job opportunities. That's one reason why the $15 minimum wage is very feasible in the state of Vermont.
Okay, Larry, let's see if somebody else has a question first. Anyone out there with a question? Yes.
This is for Bruce Lisman. 96% of businesses are small businesses. Yet the state of Vermont and several national studies have been found to be the fourth least friendly state in the union to small business due to overregulations, high taxes, and complexity of doing business. What would you do to liberate small businesses to grow and create more jobs in light of those statistics?
Okay, the question is, what would Mr. Lisman do if elected to create more jobs and loosen regulations on small business?
Yep, that's a great question. 96% of the businesses and 60% of the workforce are part of the small business clan. First, we treat all small businesses alike, whether they're a dairy farm or a convenience store, which is a huge mistake. Second, we don't really know who they are. We treat them often as inanimate objects, and so towns in particular, I think, are obliged to send out questionnaires to understand who they are and what their needs are, and then we ought to be able to map them in every community to find out who they are and what they do. Finally, I think we need to understand that a significant number of jobs in our country are created by a surprisingly small number of businesses, something like 350,000 at any given time. Most of those have employees of less than 19 people. And what does that mean? That means Google at one point probably had 10 people, but Dealer.com started with 7 guys in sandals. Today, having been sold twice, they still have about 1,200 employees. So we need to find those companies, small companies, with aspirations and real possibilities of rapid growth. And with that, make sure they don't leave before they in fact grow. So that's essential things. On the matter of regulation and law, I thought the sick leave pay was a bad idea. And one reason why I thought it was particularly bad was because the agreement in the legislature was pass the law and do a study later, whereas I thought they should have done the study and then decided if it made sense. There were opportunities to have waivers for the smallest businesses, and honestly, I thought they should have done it. I know of no employer who wants people who are ill on the line or working next to them. At the very base level of small businesses, they are accommodative, they make it work, but the law didn't work for many of them. And so I think more common sense, more insight, more understanding how important they are would really go a long way.
Sue Minter wishes to also respond to this answer.
Yeah, I want to talk about the economy, and I want to just explain when I'm traveling around, I am also finding great opportunities for hope. In the city of Barrie 6 years ago, when I was in the transportation agency, we put $19 million of public infrastructure into a city that was really in a difficult time. That public investment in water, wastewater, sewer, a new main street with a pedestrian orientation, within 6 years it has leveraged $45 million of private investment. And that community is now growing in its manufacturing, commercial, residential, and retail sector. And I visited Barrie. I rolled out my economic development plan about strategic investment like this for other communities around the state. And there were many young entrepreneurs excited and optimistic about the future. Very similar story in St. Albans. That's my vision for what we can do in communities around this state. There is opportunity for growth and optimism. The public sector needs to provide that key foundation. But I also see 4 key areas of sectors for growth. One is high tech. If you are in Burlington, you will see a booming, really growing high-tech sector. We need to bring that opportunity here to this county. But there's also next generation manufacturing. I've been to many manufacturing companies that in fact are growing twice the rate that they expected to in this economy. So I think there is great opportunity. The third sector for me is our agricultural, farm and food sector. Just traveling around and meeting so many new producers and also supporting our dairy industry. And finally, the renewable energy sector. We are growing rapidly, 6% increase in the last 6 years. So there are areas of opportunity and growth, and that's what I'm going to focus innovation, investment, and support on. Supporting investment in our downtowns, and then innovation around those 4 key economic sectors. We can't wring our hands and pretend we are failing. We have to look to the future, create a vision, and go there.
Do any of the rest of you wish to respond in some way to this question?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And having run a small business and helping grow another one to over 100 employees in Vermont, I understand the impact of a state that isn't focused on small business. So I would do a series of different things. The first is there should be a single portal for any small business to get done what they need to get done with the state and get back to selling their goods and creating jobs. That shouldn't be that complicated. Right now, small businesses have to go from one department to another department to another department, wasting incredible amounts of time. We are, as a state, the size of a medium-sized city. We should be able to have the best customer service for our small businesses. The second is actually investing time and energy in our small businesses. Imagine an agency of commerce that is focused on helping our small businesses use the internet better, to be able to get their goods and services out to market, to be able to collaborate on ad buys, to be able to attract more people to come and buy from our small businesses from both in the state but also from all over the world. And then we need to increase the number of small businesses. And one of the strategies that I believe is going to be critical to empowering people out of poverty is work that I did when I was at AmeriCorps Vista, which was microenterprise. And in fact, microenterprise works not only all over the world, but in the United States, where you give small loans with support to people who are unemployed or low income and help them to start small businesses. It works incredibly well, and it brings them to the point where they're no longer one flat tire away from spiraling back down into poverty. That's what I'll deliver. We can do it. We have a plan to pay for it, and we can get this done.
It's always good to have a plan to pay for it. It's always would be nice to know what the plan to pay for it is.
It's on the website.
Thank you. But let me turn to the question of helping small business. One of the things that we can do is to have a common definition for unemployment insurance and workers' comp, and to make the process much less complicated. And second, we can switch the focus of the agency of commerce from gifts, subsidies to large corporations, which make no difference, to helping small business, which does make a difference. Again, 98% of the jobs are homegrown. They don't get any government help. If there is assistance, any assistance should be in the form of a loan or equity participation, so that then there'd be money for the next company that comes along. And finally, I want to emphasize that the $15 minimum wage is not just the best anti-poverty program that Vermont could have. It is certainly that. But it is also an economic stimulus, because low-wage workers spend virtually all their additional income, and they spend it locally. That's quite different from the behavior of what happens when you give one of these CEOs an extra $1 million. That doesn't get spent locally. In fact, it may not be spent at all. And there also is the higher minimum wage will save taxpayers money. In fact, in the state of Vermont, it will save up to $18 million on the earned income tax credit, because right now, taxpayers subsidize low-wage employers. They couldn't get away with those wages but for public assistance, including the earned income tax credit. You pay people over $30,000 a year, they're not going to be getting the earned income tax credit because they'll be making enough money to not need public assistance. So it's a bargain for all of us who are taxpayers as well.
I wonder, could I take the other side of his argument? I mean, I listen to it most nights, and we're all friends.
And we have another question.
But,
Go ahead.
you know, but listen, I'm not in favor of raising minimum wage. I should tell you, it's not because I'm a Republican. It's just because I think our economy needs a break. We like each other, but we often disagree, and we should be honest about it. So I'm in favor of very gradual increases in minimum wage. First of all, it doesn't get to the population we imagine. Oftentimes it's seasonal workers. Sometimes it's college students. Sometimes it's the person with a second or even third job, so it's part-time. I love the earned income tax credit. Every president from Ronald Reagan to Obama have encouraged it. Many of the speakers of the House, including this one, likes it. So it's likely to end up being expanded. It's a direct subsidy for working families. There might be a better way to do it, but it works in our country. It has some problems, but it helps those who are on the way up get up there faster. It's heavily biased toward families, but also families with children, and we ought to expand it to reflect what is really the new demographic, men and women who are single and may not have children. And finally, in the state, we should be expanding it and tie it to reforms within the Agency for Human Services, which is really a very big budget, not always well spent. And with that, we can change something called the benefit cliffs, which is to say, oftentimes the state, if you will, counselor will tell a family, if you take that job or take that raise, you're going to lose net benefits, and you shouldn't do it. They know they don't want to do it that way, but that's the rules of the game. And so we should bend those cliffs and make them softer, and the net effect is we can let people get their hands on the rungs and pull themselves up with the help of earned income tax credits.
Yes, sir. Person down front.
This is a question for all of you. I graduated from Middlebury Union High School, and I found that the culture that we had there was largely imported from Hollywood or from rap music, where kids were wearing their pants around their ankles and listening to rap music. And I want to know, do any of you support teaching culture in Vermont? The type of culture like dancing, farming, I mean, you talk about the trades, but do any of you support a cultural education initiative in school?
Question is about supporting cultural education in schools. Mr. Dunn.
I'm happy to. 2 minutes? Is that what we're doing? So I actually think we should. I wouldn't necessarily put it in that framework, but I think we should, and we've actually already started. The Farm to School program that has started in Vermont has continued to grow, and I think should continue to grow, actually connects students to where their food comes from and to the agricultural sector of this state. I believe strongly in service learning. I believe that we should be having service in their community as a part of the core curriculum. I know many schools have already done that, but it allows for people to learn about the community around them and about the culture of service, which I think is something that is traditional in Vermont. It goes back many, many generations, but that we need to reinforce that and encourage that as something that Vermonters think about moving forward in a longer term. I also believe strongly in place-based education. The project that I talked about doing the historic buildings in downtown White River Junction, what they also did was interviews with people about those buildings. They did the research of the history of those buildings, who the architects were, why they were built in the first place, and how it affected the economy around it. And that's a very, very powerful and hands-on way to do it. And finally, I believe strongly in teaching the arts in schools. And the arts are great for brains. They are also great for culture and understanding of other cultures and of community. And I believe that we need to be a state that does that well. I served on the Arts Council. I actually taught acting for a little while, including at the high school that I went to. And I believe that it is absolutely critical to make for critical thinkers to have a strong and robust arts education program.
Sue, did you want to respond also?
I think it's a great question, and what I want to say is, certainly as a mom of two kids, one who's through college, one who's in high school, I worry greatly about this generation and what is inspiring them, and how do we capture their imagination and create a passion, because too many kids are not finding their passion and are not finding their way through life. And there are more and more kids and young people and adults, of course, finding drugs as an option. And I worry greatly. And I think in our school, I'm incredibly proud. My husband's on the school board. My dad was on the school board. I've been a volunteer in our school, and I feel really proud of the variety of programs. Building on Matt's point about farm to school, I was in the legislature when we passed that. My daughter in high school got to spend a whole semester visiting farms, learning about agriculture, seeing that, and one of her friends is now a full-time farmer. My son has now a personalized learning program. That is where education in this state is going now, and it offers that opportunity for those for whom have a passion in industrial arts, a passion in performance arts, a passion, as my son does, in broadcasting, can actually create opportunities with internships to get credit for school credit for their passion, because that's what we have to find. We are creating a lost generation. I worry greatly about it. So yes, we need to do the fundamentals. Yes, we need to have standards. And yes, we got to make sure they can fill out the applications. But we also have to help them find their passion. And that's where mentoring comes in. My Vermont Promise is including a mentoring program. That's where internships come in. And that's where the opportunity to help students, even as they're in middle school and into high school, have that opportunity through the personal learning program to find a place where they want to be. And I think it's critically important, and I thank you for raising the question.
I think I saw a few other hands up there. Yes, sir, down front.
My question is for all of you. First thing is, would you, given the fact that the southern Vermont economy has fallen behind, would you prioritize your economic plans to be in the south part of the state? And if so, how would you do it?
Question was about prioritizing economic development in southern Vermont. Who wants to go first? All right, Susan?
Well, I will say absolutely yes, and if you look at my economic development plan, Invest Vermont, what it does is it chooses 3 communities to really focus on strategic investment. And what I mean is, when I talked about the story in Barrie, it was an alignment of all of the different programs in state, federal, and local government actually aligning to have a direct impact and a stimulus. And that's what I think we need in other communities, particularly those who are most challenged. So it will be a competitive application to be one of these 3s. But part of the criteria is absolutely going to be the economic challenges that are faced in that community. So I would suspect that given the data that we all know about not just Bennington County, but the southern counties together, that those would be very prime applications, and certainly it's what I have my hopes and aspirations on. But it isn't just, it is going to come from the community. I've been involved in community transformation around this state, whether it's in economic development and downtown revitalization, which I worked on for 10 years in the Department of Housing, or whether it's post-Irene. My own community was devastated after Irene, and we came together with a vision and a plan to get there. And it takes local leadership. And when the local leadership is there with an idea, like you have with the Southern Development Economic Zone, you can find, we have resources, but they aren't always aligned to fit the desires and goals and aspirations and plans of the locals. And that's what my Invest VT program is all about. Strategic alignment of the investment of the dollars that we already spend to areas that are ready to make transformation and economic growth. I've seen it happen successfully. I want to see it in more places. That's my vision as your governor.
Mr. Lisman.
Well, the answer is, as a governor, I would spend a lot more time in the counties where the economy has slipped behind in order to make sure that we are properly focused on the right things to do. I really believe that the first thing we need to do is work on the cost of living in our state. That's why $700 million of taxes, fees, and surcharges for the last 6 years, which got us almost nothing in return, is something we need to expose and work on reducing. I really think a budget that has a predictable nature, which is to say it's going to be 2% a year for the next 3 years, so that your expectation isn't that everybody's cost of living, including those who are employers, will continue to rise. I'm very interested in building relationships with our employers. I'm really interested in using higher education as a source not only of future workers, but also, in the case of the University of Vermont, their technology transfer, which is to say, if you have a good idea at the university, they'll help you get a patent, and they've created 21 businesses. But it's something that ought to be in every campus, and frankly, every hospital, because those are the places where people are thinking of solutions to ordinary and sometimes extraordinary problems. And on top of that, I really think we need to understand not just the biggest employers and have a relationship with them, but the ones that are smaller and those that are quite small to find. You remember that occasional small company that's about to become a big company. I don't believe, I see it, I don't believe, I'm with Peter in saying let's not give money away for the heck of it, but I really believe it's the last thing we need to do. The first thing is build a relationship, and through that we can discover what their real problems are. The greatest danger we have as Vermonters, south or north, is our employers leaving, and that's the first thing we need to work on.
Mr. Galbraith.
Well, because I live in southern Vermont, not just because I live in southern Vermont, but I do live in southern Vermont, I will prioritize it, as I did when I served in the Senate and got the money actually for the SEVIDS strategy, as well as making Brattleboro the only place that had a 5 megawatt net metered solar plant on its landfill. So, and it is a matter of looking for individual opportunities when they're presented. But the other thing I'll do, which I've done here today, I'll tell you what you don't want to hear, and I'm going to level with you. The governor is not going to do anything about the cost of living in Vermont, because the cost of living in Vermont is determined by factors that are not within the control of the state: the severity of the winter, the cost of housing, the cost of real estate, the cost of food. And so what we can do, the one thing that we really can do, is make Vermont affordable for those who have the greatest difficulty. And that is, of course, raising income. That is the way to make things affordable. I love the earned income tax credit, but I really would prefer to people to make more money so that they don't actually need the earned income tax credit. That's really the solution for making Vermont more affordable, to deal with the cost of living for those who have the least. But I will say I absolutely agree with Bruce about turning the benefit cliff into a benefit slope.
Mr. Dunn.
So I actually don't have the same level of cynicism as Peter about what we can do about it. And I mean that quite seriously.
Candor is the word.
Anyway,
It begins with
because I do think that there are things we can do, and the exciting thing is we wouldn't have to be making it up from scratch. There are strategies that are being used all across the country, and I've had the pleasure, even though I worked from White River Junction and was rooted here, of working across the country and seeing communities that are actually making a difference in being able to grow their economy. And I would prioritize this part of the state, and here's the reason why. That we need to grow our state economy across the board, right, as a whole. And if the entire growth of the state of Vermont is on the shoulders of folks in Chittenden County, we are not going to be in a sustainable place. And frankly, we risk turning into something more like the Adirondacks or Appalachia in West Virginia. And we cannot allow that to happen. The good news is that I think this area is primed for great economic growth. It comes from actually bringing high-speed internet to the last mile, because the proximity to New York City and other places allow you to be able to do that. I've been involved with actually doing it across the country. I have a plan for getting it done. We will get it done, and I think it will make a huge difference. And for the doubters out there, it really will. And happy to, would probably take a little more time. I'm happy to talk to you afterwards. We also have it written on our website.
I'll yield my time because I'd really like to hear.
Okay.
I will not. So, just to finish up, we also have institutions of higher education here that can be great partners for entrepreneurship. Bennington College with a great new president, Southern Vermont College, but also RPI, which is not far across the border, which is doing innovative work, which can be the partner in Bennington to make it work. We also have an entrepreneurial spirit in this part of the state that can do great work if they are given the focus and attention to make it happen. And I'm happy to talk about the strategy for broadband anytime.
There will be an opportunity, I'm sure, after we're finished, for the candidates to mingle with you folks in the audience if you have a specific question.
This matter of affordability is important. Would you consider, unless we've hit our time?
Oh,
in which
okay,
case-
well, I was going to say we have time for about one more question before we have to go to our closing statements, but if you can make it brief, we can let you.
Brief. No.
I know.
Well, very briefly. So Peter and I differ yet again on the matter of, even after agreeing on a few things. Listen, I think the governor is supposed to be working on things like affordability. I don't know what we can squeeze out of it, but listen, if you look at the list of fees and taxes and surcharges that have been raised in the last 6 years, it affects all of us. Every single one of us. If you want to get a fishing license, it costs a lot more today than it did 2 years ago. If you want to get your car registered, it's cost more. Now listen, maybe it's all justified, but what I think is you ought to see the whole damn list. Every single item that was, every single fee and tax and surcharge that was raised, you ought to see it. Everybody in the state ought to see it. And on top of that, we ought to see those intermediate costs that are only related to Vermont. So other governors, in fact, have actually worked on this project. One in Indiana some years ago, not this governor, the governor before that, and others did as well. Mixed success. But in my opinion, these are the kind of things a governor is supposed to do. Not because it just sounds good in a campaign, but the matter of affordability is a matter of some importance. If you care about your economy here, what we want to do is make it easier to work here. But we also want to make it easier and cheaper to employ others here. I've met a significant number of employers in the southern part of the state, and they love it here. Let's just make it a little bit easier for them to stay right here. In matters of affordability, counts.
Can I just
Okay.
say one sentence, which is simply that the entire list of things that Bruce is talking about will make almost no difference to any Vermonters' income or affordability. The fundamental factors of your affordability are entirely different.
Okay, time for one more question, and then we'll go to closing statements. Anyone have one last question? I see a hand way in the back there.
Just telling the
Yes.
truth.
Sure, you're.
What? Vermont gas pipeline, and whether or not you support the Vermont gas pipeline and the use of eminent domain to put together the pipeline project.
Do you support the Vermont gas pipeline, I believe was the question.
What was the State Science Public Service Board? I didn't hear that part of it.
The Vermont gas pipeline reform at the Vermont Public Service Board, which the governor former, his public service board co-signed for eminent domain letters to state land from Vermonters to put together a natural gas pipeline through Middlebury. I want to hear about.
Do they support the natural gas pipeline? Okay. Anyone care to take that one on first? Mr. Weissman.
I favor the pipeline going to Middlebury, and I favor it going to Rutland. I don't know if that'll ever happen, and frankly, the cost to do this is maybe excessive versus benefit. I'm not sure. Being on the campaign trail means I don't read every single article written about it. Eminent domain is down to just, I'm told, a very small number of properties. The new CEO of Vermont Gas is far friendlier. Not to say the guy before that wasn't a really good guy, but far friendlier, is definitely customer-oriented. I think natural gas has its place in the panoply of portfolio of possible energy sources. It may only be a bridge to what I think is a more successful renewable world, but for this time frame, the time frame most of us and our children are going to be alive, I think it's important to get to Rutland. Rutland, like Bennington, has suffered a real population loss and real industrial center loss. Not all of it because of the high cost of energy, but in some cases it has been due to that. So I'm in favor of it. I understand there are others who differ with me, and I respect that.
Okay. Mr. Galbraith.
The answer is no. And I think this is an example of the state siding with, as it so often does, with large corporations against ordinary Vermonters. And to take your broader question, I think we need a different approach in the Public Service Board. I think this is particularly true with regard to industrial wind, which is extraordinarily destructive to the environment. It goes on the ridgeline, some of the most pristine places in our state. The Public Service Board pays no attention to the concerns of the local communities which are ill-equipped to fight back. This is a real economic justice issue because these are located often in the poorest and most remote parts of the state where they're least able to fight back. And guess what? The energy isn't green because the renewable energy credits are sold out of state. Basically, what is going on is Vermont ridgelines are being destroyed so that Connecticut utilities and industries can continue to burn fossil fuels, but they don't have to put industrial wind turbines on Connecticut ridgelines or offshore. I think that's wrong, and it will change if I'm governor.
And we agree. Again.
I'll just say I have not been convinced that the pipeline is good for ratepayers, and that would be a pretty high standard given what I've seen in the cost overruns. I would also say that one of the most important things that the governor will do actually in their first 6 months is appoint a new public service board chair. And I will take that very, very seriously to make sure that there is a person in that position who takes into account the needs of Vermonters as they consider the work, but also one that will deliver high-speed internet to the last corner of Vermont.
Ms. Minter.
Yes, I was going to make the point, very important point, that the 6-year tenure of the current board chair is coming to a close, and it is one of the most important appointments I think that one of us is going to be making. My vision for the future doesn't really include increased investment into new infrastructure for natural gas or any fossil fuel. I think that we will probably be getting to Middlebury, and I don't think we're going to get beyond. But I do think that the issue of customer service in the Public Service Board is a very important one, and I think Section 248 was not developed, frankly, to be overseeing the diversity of projects, the number of small-scale siting projects. And I will ask my board chair to be thinking very differently about how to use the hearing officers so that there is more access, so that there is greater customer service, but absolutely a greater ability for communities to have a say. But I also want to look to planning when we talk about wind, which I am supportive of wind, I'm supportive of solar, I'm supportive of every way we can get to our 90% renewable goal by 2050. I think we have to become more energy independent. It is our future, and I think our economy really depends on it. But it needs to be in a Vermont scale and a Vermont process. And right now we are at such a challenging place of division between developers and communities. And that's why I'm a professional planner. I believe that we need to think broadly, comprehensively, put out a map of where the resources are best utilized, and have real discussions about whether communities are willing to site them and where.
Okay, well, that concludes that segment of our event tonight. Just to bring things to a close, we'll invite each one of the candidates to make a 1-minute closing statement. And why don't we start from the beginning as we started with Matt Dunn and go down the table. And your turn.
Sure. So you are engaging in an election year unlike anything we've seen in a long time. At the national level, in the era of Donald Trump, we have an obligation as a state to continue to play the role we always have, which is as the conscience of our country. But we also have a huge moment in time here in Vermont where we'll have a new governor, a new lieutenant governor, a new Speaker of the House, a new President pro tem, and new committee chairs. And that's a moment where we can actually look at the things that we have been doing probably in the same way that we've been doing it since around 1975 and bring a fresh approach, whether it's how we do government or it's how we do economic development. I would encourage you all to look at the websites. Mine is mattdunn.com. It's done with an E, otherwise you get a Hollywood photographer who's very confused what Act 46 is and why everyone's calling him. Anyway, but please take a look at those websites because I think it's telling, because we have to start on day one building on the state that we love to create a Vermont for the future. Thank you all for coming out.
Mr. Galbraith.
Well, first, it's great to be here with you. I will be a governor who is candid, and I will not confuse being candid with cynicism, and I don't consider it cynical. I consider it cynical not to tell you the truth, and I consider it cynical to promise things that you aren't going to pay for. So I'm laying out a program, galbraithforvermont.com, that is paid for. I got into this race because I am concerned about the growing unfairness of our society, and there are things that we can do in the state of Vermont to promote about injustice here. We can raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, which is being fair to the lowest paid. It's being fair to taxpayers. We can provide universal free primary care to all Vermonters, and I'm the only person elected in the state of Vermont who actually offered a plan to finance Act 48. We can stop handing out special interest tax breaks and corporate subsidies. We can repeal the more than $50 million in tax breaks that are on the books. We can regulate the pay in publicly funded or publicly regulated institutions. I want to have a fairer Vermont, and that's why I'm running for governor.
Thank you, Mr. Galbraith. Mr. Lisman.
Yes, well, you know, I've been traveling the state for 6 years, and what I've seen is that people have gone from being simply uneasy to uneasy and angry. Angry with their government, angry with the direction it's taking us, and what they're saying more than ever, day after day after day. At any campaign stop, they're asking for a change of direction. I'm not an insider. I've never run for political office. I've never worked for government. I don't really say the usual things, and I'm not the usual guy either. What I offer is a full offering of ideas to solve problems, a strategic framework, and an opportunity to change the direction of our state. But I offer the analysis of what's gone wrong and what we can do on a go-forward basis. I have specific ideas, and I think they'll matter to you. So you can find us on Facebook, you can find us on our website. If you send me an email, I'll try to respond within the hour, but certainly within 6 or 8 hours. I urge you to vote on August 9th, and I hope you'll consider my candidacy.
Ms. Minter.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. I want to tell you I'm here because I believe that we are in tough times, and we need to work together to address our challenges. I see so many Vermonters struggling just to make ends meet because wages are not keeping up with the cost of living. Imagine that here in Vermont, 43% of women that work full-time still cannot meet their basic needs. And I'm running for governor because I want to change this, and I believe we can. I'm the candidate who has the passion and the vision and, yes, the experience to make change. I am uniquely qualified with both legislative and executive branch experience managing through the natural disaster, the worst disaster we've seen in nearly a century. And I really want to say that I actually have hope for the future, and it really comes from my experience after Tropical Storm Irene, working with people at their toughest times. I want to bring people together to make Vermont work, and I'd love to be your governor of this great state. Thank you.
All right. Well, that concludes the show. I want to thank all you folks in the audience for coming out tonight for what has been, I think, a very interesting and informative evening of discussion about the issues facing our state. Thank you for those very thoughtful questions. Thank you to the candidates as well for being here. August 9th is the primary, so mark it in your calendars. Thank you all for coming.